Rob Stone here, and glad you're with us for another edition of Big Noon Kickoff, the off-season. The gang's going to join me in a moment. The big talking point this week, transfers. A significant transfer heading down to Texas. And we're also going to talk about the impact of the transfer market in college football. Stunning numbers on how much it's changed and the impact it has on college football, and maybe what needs to be altered with the process. But we begin with one of the most dignified coaches in the game, four-time Pac12 head coach of the year, the winningest head coach in Stanford University football history, David Shaw, kind enough to join us this week from Palo Alto. Coach, thank you. And let's get right into it. All right. Pac-12 has already said that they are going to play a conference-only schedule. But how confident are you that we will have college football this fall?
Yeah, that's the question that gets asked a lot. First of all, thanks for having me on. And the answer to me changes kind of moment by moment. You know, there are moments of pessimism and moments of optimism. I believe we have a great plan. I believe our conference has a great plan. I believe other conferences have a great plan as well. But as we all know, things change very quickly, whether we're talking about nationally or locally, what this virus is doing to our country. And how we have to respond to it with the age of people that we have and the constraints, but at the same time, the rules and regulations and opportunities that we can give our people. Those things change moment to moment. So right now, I think we have a good plan. I think we're taking one step at a time, trying not to get too far ahead of ourselves. But we're still very, very optimistic.
Okay, so at this moment, you're optimistic that college football will return for you.
Yes, the answer could change in the next 20 minutes. But right now, I like the plan that we have. I like the way that we handle ourselves. Now, once again, we still have to answer a lot of questions about how to play this season. I feel great about trying to get into training camp and handling our guys in training camp and having our guys together and getting a lot of work in. But as far as playing the season, there are a lot of people that need to answer a lot of questions before we can do that.
When you guys do return, and we'll go with the optimistic route. When you do return, what do you forecast your schedule actually looking like? And when do you think it's going to start? Again, we're talking right now.
Yeah, we're still formulating that in our conference. As you know, we've gone to a conference-only schedule. So whether that starts on the 12th, the 19th, or sometime after that, I do believe it's a bit of a pushback, as our people have mentioned. But I think it's going to be possible. It's going to be doable. I trust our schedule makers. We're building in the possibility for games to get moved back and postponed. So the schedule, whatever we put up, will be adjustable to handle those things right now that we can't foresee happening. So we're trying to make sure that it can handle whatever comes our way.
So we're dealing with so many unknowns out there, Coach Shaw. What opportunity exists out there for the college football landscape because of everything we've gone through over the course of the spring, summer, and now heading towards the fall?
Yeah, first I want to say there are a lot of people out there with a lot of skepticism. I say that in a nice way about the NCAA and how it works. Some people just downright don't like the NCAA. But I'll say this, I'm on two NCAA committees and our Pac-12 working group, and talking to our coaches and administrators. There are a lot of people that are putting in a lot of hours to try to do the right thing for our student athletes. And hopefully we can make it work. We're not 100% sure that we can to have all of our fall sports, not just football. But there are a lot of things that we're working through, that a lot of people have worked through just to get to where we are, to where people now can be on campuses and starting to work out. There are a lot of things that are still coming down our way. But at the same time, I like the mentality and attitude that we've taken, that we're trying to make this thing the best we can for our student athletes.
So right now, there is not that unified message across the college football landscape. It's kind of conference to conference, and obviously that means region to region. In your eyes, should there be one voice dictating everything that should be going forward in college football at this point in dealing with the pandemic?
To be honest, in general, I would say yes. I would love for that to happen. Where we are right now, I don't know that I'm in favor of that, because the regions are so different. And I think it makes a lot of sense for us to play our regional games right now, because one state is different from another region. So I think it makes more sense for us to handle our issues on our own, because we may have issues that other people don't have. Other people may have issues that we don't have. So for right now, I don't think there needs to be blanket rules for everybody, especially as far as scheduling. And the reason why we go to a conference-only schedule so that we can all have the same way of testing, the same way of monitoring, and all be on the same page and be able to move our games as we see fit based on if a game is postponed or canceled for some reason.
As on all Power Five campuses, college football is a major moneymaker for the athletic department and for the university. And recently, your school disbanded 11 sports programs. How is that news sitting in the college football offices that you're at right now?
Yeah, it was a very difficult time period for us. It's still very difficult for a lot of us. But those are decisions. Those are tough decisions that sometimes have to be made. But it also is kind of flies in the face of what a lot of people say is going on in college sports, which is there's just a flow of cash all over the place. Every sport, every varsity sport on every campus is more expensive every year. That's a fact. So what we had to do on our campus is not just about COVID-19, but I think COVID-19 did influence it. But I think a lot across the nation, a lot of universities are looking at finding a way to handle this difficult time.
Coach, let's talk about your actual program. And I know last year was a bit of an aberration for you. 4-8, first time you missed a bowl game in your head coaching tenure at Stanford University. So with all that in mind and all the changes that are forthcoming with the schedule and the unknowns of it, what are maybe some of the top 2-3 focuses that you are dealing with, you and your staff have pinpointed and saying, we need to really focus and spend some time on A, B, and C to get back to where Stanford football typically is?
Well, as we all know, sometimes things aren't as bad as you think they are. Sometimes they're not as good as you think they are. You look back at last year and the difficulty of all the injuries we had. The bright light, the shining bright light for us is we got a lot of young guys with a lot of experience. So we're coming back a more experienced team. Some of our young guys got a chance to play and start and play extensively. So I feel better about where we are on the offensive line with the experience and the talent that we have. Not just our young guys playing, but some of our veterans coming back healthy. I'm excited about that. I think we've got an outstanding quarterback that I think is really going to jump on the scene with a great receiving core and an exciting running back group. I think our defensive line, linebackers, and secondary have a chance to be one of the best in our conference and maybe knock on the door being one of the best around the country. So as difficult as last year was, I think it's really set us up to maybe surprise a few people. But at the same time, our guys learned and grew through a lot last year to hopefully be able to jump back on the national team this year.
I'm curious, how are you guys handling the messaging of the Black Lives Matter movement amongst yourselves? And how do you think you're going to recognize it when the season does return?
Well, first and foremost, I'm so proud of our guys, our Stanford guys. We've given them opportunities to express themselves. Haven't given them a lot of guidance, just given them a platform, and a lot of them use that platform for positivity. Our guys have put out a video. Our guys have put a statement out. Many of ours individually have done a lot of things to really hope to inspire people to really do what's right. And for me, this is pretty simple. This is about trying to help America be what America should be, which is you should be able to walk through any American city, regardless of what you look like, and feel safe. That's the bottom line for me. We're going to push for things that are right, push for justice for all people. And the Black Lives Matter movement is just another way of saying, you know what, just because I'm Black, you need to look at me and say that my life matters. So there's not a political statement, not trying to get into battles with anybody. Would love for people that walk around this country looking like me to feel safe with the police and feel safe in any neighborhood.
What are some things that you guys are planning as far as messaging in continuing this conversation?
Well, first and foremost, really trying to get everybody on our team to understand the value of voting. And it's not just about the presidential election. It's about all the things that are on the ballot, both local and national, and getting them to understand what that process is at a young age. The younger they understand it, the more active they'll be throughout their lives in these political processes. So it's about being smart, being educated, using your voice that you have to influence your arena. Beyond that, we're doing a lot of education. We're talking about making sure that our people understand what's going on in the country, but at the same time, understanding how we as individuals can interact best with each other, regardless of what we look like. So we're talking about training throughout the year, doing different things to train our people of all colors and all races to really be able to communicate with each other on a one-to-one basis.
Coach, nationally, you get the sense that some of the luster is off the Pac-12 over the course of the last couple of years. Not as much involvement as far as the national title hunt and the great recruits and just everything that really is college football. So how does the Pac-12, what would you advise the Pac-12 to do to get themselves back up into that top tier of conferences in college football?
Well, the easy answer, first of all, is you got to win. You got to win big. But what I would say for anybody out there who has this question is to remember, and once again, I grew up in football. Like my dad was a coach. I've always been around this, and football is cyclical. It wasn't too long where we said, the SEC is just a one-person team. It's not very deep. Now it is deep. For a while, the Pac-12 was deep. For a while, the Pac-12 was top-heavy. It was always Oregon or Stanford or SC or somebody else winning those Pac-12 championships. Well, now those things change. So the idea now, if you really look at what's been going on, I think our conference is recruiting better. I think we've got an outstanding roster of coaches in our conference. I think there's going to be a lot of exciting football in our conference going forward.
Coach Shaw, great catching up with you. Thanks for the time. Can't wait for you to get out there and actually coach these young men. And we hope to see you on the field early September. Can I be that optimistic? Early September?
Hey, there's nothing wrong with optimism. Let's make it happen.
Coach Shaw, thanks, and continue spreading that message. We appreciate your time. And as we continue to wait to find out when college football will actually start, we do know that a lot of major programs are going to be starting it with a lot of new names, courtesy of the transfer portal. And there was a major transfer this week. Nebraska's leading receiver last season, J.D. Spielman, taking his talents down to Fort Worth and joining a TCU team that really needs some help in special teams and, of course, in the wide receiving department. And with that bit of news, we bring in the gang. Urban Meyer hanging out above me, Reggie Bush, Matt Leinart, Joel Klatt. Coach, do you notice anything different in my background?
I see the athlete's jersey hanging over your right shoulder. That's beautiful.
You finally got a real athlete up there, man.
That's a good-looking jersey. Let me tell you something. That is not going back to the Fox Sports prop department. That is now staying at my house. All right.
Hey.
We're going to start with a quick trivia question for you guys. What do Cam Newton, Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray, and Joe Burrow all have in common?
Transfers.
That
Heisman's.
won Heisman's and are now in the NFL. So transfers among the quarterback department and the entire team really becoming a major talking point. In fact, this season, 15 to 20 Power 5 programs are projected to start quarterbacks that have transferred into the program. So this week, we're going to talk about our 5 biggest impact transfers and what really is going on in the transfer market, which is going to be a fascinating discussion. So we polled all of our guys, including our partner, Brady Quinn. Here are our top 5 impact transfers, and we're going to start with the wide receiver leaving Michigan, heading to Texas, Tariq Black. Remember, the Longhorns need to replace their top 2 receivers. Last year for Black, 25 grabs, 323 receiving yards, and 3 touchdowns. Checking in at number 4, we got our run on quarterbacks. KJ Costello heads from the farm to Starkville, and he'll be leading Mississippi State. Mike Leach, we're going to be talking about the system and, of course, the quarterbacks in those. Last 2 quarterbacks under Mike Leach, they have thrown for a combined over 10,000 passing yards and 86 passing touchdowns. Number 3, another quarterback, Jamie Newman, leaves the ACC and Wake Forest for Georgia, which now has 2 major quarterbacks that have transferred in, vying for that number 1 spot. We go to number 2. Let's continue with the quarterback discussion. A guy who last year was in the Heisman conversation, played just 4 games for Houston. The Cougars went 1-3, and then he decided to redshirt. We all thought it was awfully curious at the time. What does he do? He transfers out now to Miami. 82 total touchdowns, 14 turnovers over the course of his career. Number 1 on the impact list from Oklahoma to Ohio State. Running back Trey Sermon scored 25 touchdowns in 3 seasons at Oklahoma, led the Sooners with 13 touchdowns in 2018, had some limited action over the course, particularly of the last season. Remember, they need to replace J.K. Dobbins, a second-round pick, who's now with Baltimore. So there's your Big Noon top impact transfers. Matt, I'll begin with you. Trey Sermon was number 1 on our list, number 1 on your list. Why is he the number 1 impact transfer?
Well, I look at, you mentioned some of his numbers. So I look at what he did at Oklahoma, and he's a really good football player. And a couple of years ago, rushed for nearly 1,000 yards, rushed for 2,000 yards in his career there. I think because of injuries, and also, Jalen Hurts coming on board last year, who really took a bulk of the carries in Oklahoma's running game, we just saw him kind of get lost in the shuffle. He is going to a perennial powerhouse in Ohio State, who's in the playoff mix, national title mix every single year. And who just left Ohio State? J.K. Dobbins, who rushed for 2,000 yards. Someone has to replace that production. Justin Fields is going to run the football a little bit. Master Teague, coach who you know well, is there. But Trey Sermon is a guy in the same build, probably a little more explosion than J.K. Dobbins, that I think can match that type of production, whether it's catching the ball in the backfield, whether it's running the ball in that system. And then the last point, Justin Fields, the passing game, I think that's going to evolve even more this year, which will open up that box count and give way more to the running game. So I'm excited. I think Trey Sermon has a monster year for the Buckeyes.
Urban, I'm curious, what's the early word in Columbus on Sermon?
Very high expectations, a great young person that is working his tail off. I think he's going to be the most impactful. He's simply got the best offensive line in front of him. I think Ohio State might have the best offensive line in the country. And as Matt said, you're going to take some pressure off of Justin Fields. You have to. And especially you're going to see some big numbers. They're going to play some games, a lot of games where they're just simply better than their opponent. And you try to just get the game going. We've been in those situations before. You don't want to run the quarterback. You have to get the run game going and take pressure off of Justin Fields.
Is it as simple, and Matt, you use this term, plug and play. Is that what Sermon is in Columbus right now for you guys?
I think you have Master Teague, who's not going to give that thing up easily, and you got Crowley, who's a young player that's very highly thought of. So they're not going to give it up, but I would say that Trey Sermon would be the starting running back this year.
Reg, let's go down to the U. D'Eriq King was your guy. What do you expect for him in that new conference?
Yeah. Well, I'm excited for him because he's going to a program that needs a player like him. When you think about the University of Miami, for me, I think about the old days, the U, back when they were putting out first-round draft picks, year in and year out. And right now, when you look at the University of Miami, they had the worst rushing offense last year in the ACC. They also had the number 10 scoring offense and were ranked 90th in the country. And when you think about D'Eriq King, who accounted for 50 touchdowns in one season, he's giving you a lot because he is a dual threat quarterback. And so he works well with the style of play from a lot of quarterbacks that we've seen year in and year out now at the quarterback position. Everybody's a dual threat quarterback. And so D'Eriq King brings a different dynamic to this offense. I believe he's going to bring an explosive dynamic. Also, when he pulls the football down and runs, he's like trying to tackle a running back. And so you put a guy like that, which is the most important position on the football field, on a team like the University of Miami, I believe that only means success. And I can't wait to see how it plays out for him.
Speaking of dual threat quarterbacks, Jamie Newman leaves Wake Forest, heads to Athens. Joel, I can't remember the last time I saw a Bulldog quarterback think about running the football.
Yeah, which to a large extent might have been one of the reasons that they've been held back, and maybe haven't gotten over the top, because they certainly have had the roster. In particular in the last couple of years under Kirby Smart. When I think of impact transfers, guys, it comes down to really two things for me. And I know that I'm going to lead this from a quarterback perspective, but it comes down to the quarterback position, and it comes down to a roster and a team that is capable of competing for a playoff spot. When I think of the most impactful transfers of the last few years, I think of the Cam Newtons of the world, who won a Heisman Trophy in the national championship, and the Baker Mayfields of the world who were competing in the playoffs, winning Heisman trophies. Kyler Murray. Last year you had Jalen Hurts, you had Joe Burrow. They all have one thing in common. They were competing at the highest end of college football. So while I think Jamie Newman might not be as talented maybe as D'Eriq King, his team is going to compete at the highest level. They're going to have a chance to win that East Division in the SEC. They're going to have a chance to win that conference and potentially compete in the playoffs, where I just don't see Miami playing at that level, and I certainly don't see Mississippi State playing at that level. So while I love KJ Costello, I love De'Ara King, I went with Jamie Newman because of his impact on college football more generally. He's a guy that I think can and potentially will win that position. We'll see what happens with JT Daniels and his transfer and eligibility. But Newman is a very good player. He's very athletic, and I think he's mature enough to step in, be a leader, and go ahead and compete at that highest end of college football, potentially for a playoff spot. So that's why I went with Jamie Newman at number 1.
Yeah, I think maturity is going to be a big part of that decision process through the course of summer leading into fall in Athens. All right, we got a Twitter question, Matt, that's going to tee you up on this next response. How do you think KJ Costello and that air raid offense is going to do in the SEC? What will be the toughest thing with the weird offseason for these transfers? Also, when and where will this be on television? All right, we'll get to that a little bit later. Number 1, KJ Costello. How does he fit into that system of Mike Leach and that air raid offense?
Listen, KJ Costello is a really good football player, and I'm more just excited to see this system and he go into the SEC with Mike Leach and compete. I totally agree with Joel. Georgia, the roster, the fact that Jamie Newman or JT Daniels, they have a better shot of leading their team to a playoff than Mississippi State. I understand that. But when I combine KJ Costello, his skill set, his game, and this system, this kid is going to have a massive year. Rob, you mentioned the numbers of these quarterbacks that come from Mike Leach a few minutes ago. I mean, they're astronomical. This kid 2 years ago was an all Pac-12 quarterback. He threw for 3,500 yards, 29 touchdowns. He can run the football. He's a big dude, athletic. And I'm excited. I think we all are excited and entertained to see what Mike Leach can do in the SEC. And I think he's got a great signal caller in KJ Costello leading that football team. And then the second part of that question, I think just for transfers, is just the lack of reps that you don't get on the field, especially in an air raid attack where there's a lot of concepts and a lot of verbiage. But KJ Costello, you talk about maturity. He's a mature player. He's been around college football for a while. He's got a lot of experience. I think he'll fit in really nicely for the Bulldogs and in the SEC.
How many yards do you think Reggie could throw for if he was the quarterback in Leach's air raid system?
Listen, I don't know how good Reg. How many balls did you throw in college? You threw a couple halfback passes.
I threw a couple halfback passes. I had a touchdown, didn't I? Yeah, I had a touchdown.
You know what they did? They took Reggie out and put in Desmond Reed to throw the halfback.
You know what it was? No. You know what it was? I was scoring too many touchdowns, man. They had to give somebody else some shine. That's what it was.
I'll tell you right now. I'll tell you how many yards he would throw for. Over 3,500, because like anybody with a pulse throws for over 3,500 yards in that offense. Just go look at the history, man. It doesn't matter. I remember, I was at Colorado and we played against Cliff Kingsbury. And a lot of us at the time thought to ourselves, like, hey, this new coach at Texas Tech, Mike Leach, remember he was the coordinator at Oklahoma in 99. He came from Kentucky. Bob Stoops hired him in their first year at Oklahoma in 99. Then he left. And he wasn't a part of that 2000 national championship team at Oklahoma with Josh Heupel as the quarterback. He had gone and gotten the head job at Texas Tech. He has Cliff Kingsbury for the first couple of years. A lot of people thought it wasn't the system, that it was actually Cliff Kingsbury. Then all of a sudden it was like B.J. Simmons, Seth Dagey, Graham Harrell. It didn't matter. Like, you run a guy out there, he throws for 4,500 yards, and I was the most jealous guy in the room because all I
So let me throw this at you, Joel. There's one common denominator that you're not mentioning. They don't play in the SEC. Now they are. And I just got a lot of respect for those defenses in the SEC. So Mike Leach is a dear friend, and I'm anxious to see this.
Yeah,
well, he doesn't have an offensive line in front of him. That quarterback's going to get tattooed like he's never been tattooed before. This is not, all due respect to the Pac-12 and everywhere else, the Big 12. You're in the SEC where defense is a premium. There's a lot of NFL draft picks that run really, really fast. They're going to be making millions of dollars. Trying to get that quarterback. So I'm not buying a 4,500 yards.
Rebut that respectfully, because, and here's why, because the Big 12 in the early 2000s was the league of defense with the Tommy Harrises of the world and Teddy Lehmans of the world at Oklahoma, and he was having success there. Texas had great defenses as well. And remember, he cut his teeth with Hal Mumme at Kentucky against the defensive coordinator at Florida and Bob Stoops, who was winning a national championship under Steve Spurrier, the head coach. It was that interaction. Stoops knew he had the better players, the better athletes, like you're suggesting, and he couldn't stop the Kentucky offense with Tim Couch, which is the reason he went and hired Mike Leach to Oklahoma as his offensive coordinator. So I do think that you're right. He's going to see faster, but this is an offense that in its genesis that had great athletes and faster athletes, and take that advantage away for them by doing two things. One, you combine the BYU system of throwing the football down the field from the mid-'80s, and then you combine that with the triple option principles of it doesn't matter who touches the football. So I do think it's going to work, but one caveat, Coach, he won't win a division because he's yet to do that in his career. And he's certainly not going to do it at Mississippi State. So to the point that he's not going to win at the top end of the SEC, you're absolutely right. But I think that we would be naive to think that he's not going to put up massive numbers, because he's done it in regardless of what conference, dating all the way back to the SEC when they were playing, Florida teams that were winning the national championship.
Here's one thing I can guarantee in the SEC. Every defensive coordinator in the SEC is waiting for those schedules to be verified, and they have their fingers crossed saying, please don't let Mississippi State be there, because it is going to be an atrocious week or 2 weeks of preparation dealing with Mike Leach and that offense. Real quick, to wrap up Reggie as a quarterback. Reggie, 3 pass attempts, 1 touchdown. Who did you throw that touchdown to? Matt, you or Reggie anybody can answer this one.
Was it Dwayne Jarrett?
Bam! Bang! Good job, Reg.
DJ. Yes, sir.
I love it. All right, now let's get to the meat, though, the red meat of this transfer conversation, because it's a fascinating one. And again, social media is going to kind of launch us into this conversation with the following question: what changes would the guys make, if any, to the transfer portal or process? One-time transfer, don't wait a year, unlimited transfers, et cetera, et cetera. Well, let's talk about the increase in waivers that have been requested and have been accepted, because the numbers are startling. There has been an increase by 767% over the last 3 years in transfer requests. 767% increase. That is startling. And in those same years, the approvals have increased 530%. So you take a look over my shoulder at some of the stats out there. So the big question is, why are we seeing this increase, and why are we seeing more and more of these transfer requests being accepted? Let's go to the rules on that one. And this is what we're supposed to be following as you take a look at the totals and the improves on the left side of your screen. Again, 104 total, 63 of them approved in 2019. Here is the rule, the law regarding the transfer situation. Players transferring must sit out a year of competition unless they graduate from the original institution, which I think we're all checkmarking. We agree with this one. Here's where it gets a little murky. Or obtain an immediate eligibility waiver from the NCAA. Urban criteria. Is it being met? This is fascinating. For a waiver to be granted, an institution must demonstrate that the student athlete's transfer is due to documented, extenuating, extraordinary, and mitigating circumstances outside of the student athlete's control that directly impacts the health, safety, or well-being of the student athlete. Are the criteria for the transfer, Urban, being met as a general rule?
No, they're not. So I can just give you personal experience. And we had a philosophical opinion that when a young man, and this came from our athletic director, when a young man wanted to transfer, we were going to do everything we can do to help him. And I'm a big fan of the graduate transfer. I think we've had at least a dozen players go on and have great success. Joe Burrow is the most famous one. He had a great battle with Dwayne Haskins and went on and had a great year. But there's many more that we've had guys that go on and they just get caught in a position where there's a lot of loaded. It's very loaded with talent. However, the immediately eligible waiver, my understanding is, and from personal experiences, if you really assist, and that means we have nothing when you talk to the NCAA, our compliance people, and say we fully support this young person going on to another school. I don't think we've ever had one not become eligible. And that there's been 2 this year. One went to Boston College, and one went to Rutgers, where 2 players left, and Ohio State was very helpful, did everything they could possibly do to help this guy out. We did that with Tate Martell. I've done that with every player that ever has left, and they become eligible. So I don't know if we've ever had one denied. And there's got to be a reason. There's got to be a reason. And I see other players get denied, and regardless of what people say, I think it's because they're not assisting that young person to get eligible.
Joel, when we saw the list of the rules and the regulations, if you will, in allowing a transfer, you can understand on first blush, oh, this is certainly looking out for the benefit of the student athlete. But when you really start to channel it down, it really is a much broader context and stroke than I think the NCAA initially intended.
Yeah, well, I think that it was written with good intentions, right? But there are unintended consequences to the way that this has borne out in practice. The way that it's written, it basically, in its inception, wanted to make an exception for a student athlete who maybe was mistreated by a coach or a school or something along those lines and wanted out, or had a family reason where he needed to get closer to home because of medical reasons with his family or so on and so forth. So again, in its inception, that's what it was written to do, right? And yet, in practice, it's not being used that way, because one of the things that's happening, and Coach, you brought up the school, Ohio State, cooperating with the kids who want to transfer out of Ohio State. Well, here's what happens. Extenuating circumstances mean that you have to basically allege something against your current school in order to get out from it. And that current school sits there and thinks to themselves, okay, we can deny this and then have to fight it behind closed doors with the NCAA, or we can just say, hey, you know what? You go do you. We're going to be just fine. And you go ahead and transfer, and they kind of let them slide out. So I think it actually goes back to what Coach was talking about. What's the school's philosophy? At a place like Ohio State, their roster is plenty deep for when kids decide that it's not for them. And they know that the majority of kids are going to stay there and want to try to win a championship for the Buckeyes. So it's not going to hurt them as much. When you get to programs that don't quite have the roster that Ohio State does, what you see is those schools are more apt to fight these transfers and say, no. Those extenuating circumstances that the kid was bringing up in the waiver, those aren't true. And so they fight those, and then that's where you get a waiver maybe denied. But then it comes back to how well funded and how well represented is the student athlete. And the sad reality is, guys, if a student has some money or his family has some money and can hire a good lawyer, he will be eligible. That is the sad state of transfers right now in college football.
And no players have money in college. So,
well, Reg, you chime in. This was a concept that originally you were very much opposed to. Have things changed in your mind?
Yeah, because I think when you look at the time period when me and Matt were in college, part of our success story was built on us overcoming maybe some obstacles from competition. We felt like we built our program was built off of competition. We even had a day of the week for practice called Competition Tuesday, because that's what everything was built off of. So for us, we went towards the competition, and we didn't really shy away from it. And so when the transfer portal thing really started to take off, to me, in the beginning, I kind of I was on the other side because of just my experiences. And now when I look at success stories like Joe Burrow, like Cam Newton, like some of these other big name players who've had opportunities to go to programs and play right away and make money for themselves, at the next level, that's where, I've changed my mind, because I've seen the amount of good that it does for players when they feel like they have a better opportunity somewhere else. You think about Justin Fields at Ohio State, leaving Georgia. There's a long list of other guys, but when you think about some of those success stories and what it did for them, Joe Burrow is obviously going to be, number one, because he won the Heisman Trophy. maybe arguably put together the best season of any college quarterback, in 1 year. That's where I side with the players, because I understand what it's like to go through this system and to not be able to make money. I understand what it's like to go through the system and to to feel like, man, I wish I had a little bit more. And so when I see these opportunities play out for these players, it's, to me, it's amazing.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think as a former player, you mentioned USC, and just to make it somewhat personal, there was a time where I almost transferred from USC. Actually, before Reggie came, Carson Palmer came back for a senior year. I had sat 2 years. I was competing with other quarterbacks. I was trying to find my way, and the first time, a little adversity, I almost ran. And I remember having a conversation with my high school football coach. It kind of just lit a fire back under me and just said, this is a great opportunity, take it. And the rest is history. I was able to win that job and start 3 years. So didn't shy away from the competition, eventually embraced it and became a better football player. I think when we're looking at this transfer portal and the mobility that coaches have to pick up and leave when they have a better opportunity or a better payday, I do like the power that the players have in that regard. When you talk about coaches who've recruited these players there, and then they pick up and leave, a player should have that right to say, you know what, this isn't the guy I play for. This isn't the system I play for. I want to go try, have a better opportunity somewhere else. I understand that. I think the thing that makes me nervous is because when you enter the transfer portal, there's no guarantee you're going to find a home on the other side. And just to throw a few numbers out there, last year, 125, they're going to find a home, but there's not a lot of, these teams only have so many scholarships to offer. So that is my concern with it. And again, Joel and Coach, you kind of hit on the rules. I think things do need to change, but you better be ready to potentially suffer the consequences if you do enter the portal, because it doesn't guarantee you a home.
Yeah.
So that scholarship should be guaranteed then. That scholarship should be guaranteed to you no matter where you go. It should transfer with you, no different than like a baseball player who plays in Major League Baseball. When they get traded, that contract stays with them because it's guaranteed. So if you go to a college and you get a scholarship, it should transfer with you to whatever school you decide to go to. You should not be penalized for that, especially when you're 18, 19 years old, trying to make the decision of your life. And you don't have the right support system at home to do that, then what? So that should transfer with you.
So, Coach, looking at the wording and hearing the arguments back and forth, what is it that you would change?
Well, first, I do want to tell you it's something that I talked with a couple colleagues that we were fortunate in 2014. We had a upperclassman quarterback that could have left on multiple occasions and decided to stick around. His name was Cardell Jones. He was a third-string quarterback behind two very good players. And his high school coach, a lot like Matt, Matt telling his story, said, stick this thing out, get a degree from Ohio State, and then after that, you can go play wherever you want to play. And he made a decision to stick it out. So we won a national championship with a third-string quarterback. I don't know if that'll ever happen again, because I don't think there is such a thing as a third-string quarterback anymore. I mean, there might be a freshman, but I'm talking about a veteran guy that's been in your program that knows the offense. So I think that's going to be – I don't know if it'll ever happen again. The thing I change is make a 1 year, one time. You can transfer anywhere, anytime you want, like a lot of the other sports. Make it one time. I was very opposed at the beginning. I get it. Like someone said, a coach can get up and go. But I'd make it a one-time transfer option. That's it.
Coach, one time with immediate eligibility?
Yeah, one-time option. Well, right now you can transfer and you got to sit out. You can do that, but one time the coach can't. The university's got to support it. You go on and play wherever you want. I heard people say when a coach leaves and everybody can leave, you'll just destroy programs, and that's not fair to everyone. So, one-time option and move on. No more special circumstances. No more, attorneys getting involved. Because I agree. When Joel Klatt or whoever said the reality is, you hire an attorney, you have means. That means your family has means, and you hire a big-time attorney. That guy's eligible. And is that right? For maybe you don't have the means. That's not fair.
Joel, Matt, anything you guys want to add to this discussion?
I would just say that there, if we go down that route of immediate eligibility one time, regardless, there's going to have to be some really deep thought about roster construction, because you could have some teams lose basically a position group, and then all of a sudden, it would be almost impossible for them to compete. And a lot of that is hindered by the capping of 25 incoming players, and a transfer counts against that 25 in any given year, that you can only have 25 initial scholarships. So there needs to be a total reworking of how a roster is constructed, what counts against an initial year versus a total number of scholarships. Do we expand from 85 to 95, so on and so forth? And then the last point I would make is I think that we need to get a better handle on the recruiting calendar, so that current coaches can spend more time with their current players. And I think you would have less transfers if that were to happen. Right now, the recruiting calendar is so expanded that coaches don't have the time with their current players to invest in them to get them to stay at their schools. So it's a cyclical issue right now, but we got to get our arms, and I don't know what the answer is, Rob, but we got to get our arms wrapped around all of that.
Well, Joel, that's going on now. This is not a new dilemma. This is roster management is a big part of your job. The only thing that's added now is the recruiting departments usually have a transfer specialist.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, there's someone that's constantly, for example, Master T gets hurt. Okay, what do? Well, let's go to our recruiting specialist in charge of transfers. What fifth-year guys are available out there that become immediately eligible? Oh, Trey Sermon, let's go get him. So that's already started. That's and I told the story about when I'm walking out the field with Dwayne Haskins in his first year starting. He has 3 or 4 big games, and the recruiting guy grabs me and Ryan Day on the way out the field and said, "We need to start looking at transfer quarterbacks." And I was like, "I've never done that." So what are you talking about? Well, what if he leaves? So that everything you're discussing is already happening. I don't know if you have to adjust, 95. And I think what Joel said is currently happening across America.
All right, so we learned a couple things here. Number one, it's a great job for a GA, right? Be the transfer portal vice president at the University of X, and then money plus lawyer.
That'd be a good Reggie Bush job.
Right. I'll take that job. And then money plus lawyer equals eligibility. All right, let's look at what the fans thought would be the top 5 impact transfers coming into the season. Very similar to our list: Sermon, King, Costello, Newman, and Tariq Black down there in Austin. All right, social media question time right now. And we're going to talk offense. Best offense we've seen in the last 10 years. Who wants first dibs on this one?
Oh, my God.
A lot of numbers, Reg. It's a lot of numbers.
Wow.
Can I just say something?
Go for it.
I mean, those are some great numbers. LSU is the greatest offense I've seen in the history of college football. You have a quarterback who threw 60 touchdowns. You had a running back who ran for 100 yards. You had, 3 or 4 first-round NFL wide receivers on that roster, and you ran through the toughest conference in college football with ease. And what did we had Coach O on a couple weeks ago? What, Burrow threw 7 touchdowns against Oklahoma in the first half in a playoff game? I mean, no disrespect to all those teams, and Coach, you might have a bias with that team with Zeke, but I'll tell you what, last year's LSU offense was unbelievable.
Oh, special.
How about these numbers, Matt, to back you up? They led the nation 48.4 points per game. Impressive, right? They upped their game during the playoffs, averaging 52.5 points per game in their 2 playoff games. I mean, these numbers, Klatt, are stunning, staggering.
Not only that, they scored 42 against Georgia, who was 6th in the country when they played them. They went to Tuscaloosa against Alabama, scored 46 points. Georgia 37 in the 42 against Clemson. I just they were insane, and I think they were the best offense that I've ever seen. A couple of shout outs I want to give: the Florida State offense that won the national championship under Jameis Winston. Yep. Incredible offense. Baylor's offense that exact same year averaged 7 touchdowns a game. That's the highest that anybody's ever averaged. And then I would go back. There was 2 offenses that actually played each other in what became a low-scoring national championship game, oddly, in 2008. Florida's offense with you, Coach, and that Oklahoma offense, those two offenses were ridiculously good.
Yeah, it was 7-7 at halftime, and it was Sam Bradford against Tim Tebow. And that was, you're right, and they came out, well, this is a long story, but they came out and played an odd defense. We weren't ready for it, and they turned the ball over twice inside the 5-yard line. But since I am very biased, I would have to agree with I'd agree with LSU, but I got to throw the Buckeyes, and then I don't see the Gators on there, but I agree that, well, that's after the 10 years.
I don't say the 05 Trojans on there either.
Well, that's the last 10 years, Matt. We've been out the league.
Joel just mentioned the 08 Florida Gators.
I mean, they're right on the, that was 11 years, 12 years. I'm good at that.
Right on the cusp. All right, let's wrap things up with the logo game. And Reggie, Matt, Joel, this one's for you, but Reggie, you get first dibs.
I'm always nervous when it's me first.
Look at this logo and what comes to your head. I didn't pick the logo, by the way. This is definitely me.
Do you want the truth?
I want the truth, Reggie. I can handle the truth. I got your number behind me. I want the truth.
That's the truth, Joe. That's the truth, Rob. You cannot handle the truth. That is the truth right there.
Honestly, I'd rather save my time and hear Joel talk about the NCAA.
Oh, man.
Matt, you're going to lose your Wi-Fi bandwidth by the time Joel's done with this.
Did you guys notice I'm in a new room?
I did notice. Is that the nursery you're in, by the way?
Yeah. This is the makeshift office, boys.
I love it. Mine's going to be quick. I think that college football should move away from the NCAA. Power 5 schools should go autonomous and go completely away from the NCAA. They don't need them. I don't think that they serve any purpose outside of conducting championships for volleyball and baseball and swimming and so on and so forth. So I think the Power 5 should just absolutely remove themselves and become completely autonomous from the NCAA.
I want to make sure we're clear because we're all friends, right? We're in a nice safety circle here. I did not come up with the logo game this week. None of these logos am I responsible for. Do you understand? You guys all signed the waiver because here comes logo number 2, and I'll give you one guess who it's for.
Coach is frozen.
His Wi-Fi is frozen or he's frozen. Huge respect to the internet services in Columbus for shutting things down when that logo comes up.
Yeah, I see it. I'm glad. Too bad I had to come back to it. I would say,
Coach.
And my colleagues know this, Reggie and Matt and Brady and Rob, you know this. I see incredible respect. That's what I see. I didn't say but incredible respect. You better tie your shoes real tight and strap it up because you're getting ready for something that's coming at you. I would imagine it'd be the same thing you said, USC Notre Dame. I see incredible respect. Once again, there's a big difference between respect and like. There's a lot of dislike, but a lot of respect.
Well, we heard it when Charles Woodson joined us on set a couple times last season, the immediate respect and admiration you had for a talent like that, playing for a program like Michigan, Coach.
Of course. And I always will. And that's, I think, the approach that I was taught when I was a young man and growing up in that rivalry.
So what I love is your lack of like for Michigan carries on constantly in your daily life. When Urban Meyer's Pint House was reopening, this was something that popped up on social media. Sanitation is our main priority. I'm not sure what they're spraying the aerosol on. If only I could figure it out.
That's a whole lot of respect right there. You know what I'm saying?
Hey, corner table, corner seat in the fish bubble. Order the salmon, baby.
Oh my God. What I would do to be in the Pint House bubble right now. That's the only bubble I want to be in right now. Urban's Pint House bubble. Please make it happen, Coach.
Your table is awaiting.
Oh, I love it. Shrimp and grits for $5. Let's do it. And show me that dessert and drink menu one more time. All right, guys. Always great reconnecting with you. Have a safe week. We'll be back again next week for another edition of Big Noon Kickoff, the offseason.